This meeting of the Denville Township Board of Education is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Due to the state of emergency declared by the government of the state of New Jersey and the United States regarding COVID-19, this board meeting is being held via video conference as well as in person. Electronic and regular notices of this meeting was provided to the Daily Record and/or the Star Ledger of Morris County, has been delivered to the township clerk, has been posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education office, and at each of the school buildings in the district. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kim?
Present. Can you hear me?
Here.
Mr. Capello?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Luer?
Here.
Mrs. Gould?
Here.
Mrs. Wagner?
Here. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, no special presentations tonight, so superintendent's comments. Dr. Forte?
Just want to give you a little update where we're at with an extracurricular enrichment. It is on the agenda tonight for approval for an extracurricular program and an enrichment program, which will begin in December and January. The enrichment program is for the 2 elementary schools. It's after school. It is funded by registration fees. And the extracurricular program was done. The 2 elementary schools each have 2 clubs, and the middle school put together 9 clubs, including some music, band, and even the school play. Everything would be done virtually, and the activities would begin sometime in December or January. Not all of them begin exactly the same time. The athletics for Valley View is put on hold because of the NJSA rules. Not that we have to follow NJSA, but in the past we always have. So anything, if we are going to have any athletics in the middle school, it wouldn't begin until January 11th. A little update on COVID. The numbers in our town and region. We have moved into the orange level. That was on the report I handed you. That's dated November 14th. We expect a new one to be out on Wednesday. And we will make our decisions on reopening the school on the 30th based on the data that I'm going to go over right now. As of now, Denville had approximately 200 cases from the beginning of COVID in March through Halloween. And from November 1st to November 23rd, we've had approximately 105 cases. So we've increased 50% just in this part of November. And that has filtered into the schools. Our schools right now have 11 positive cases, 7 presumed. Let me define for you what a presumed case is. A presumed case would be a student who's someone in their household has symptoms and is positive, and the student in question also has symptoms. And then we have 25 plus possible. Now, one of the problems right now is people are having a hard time getting the testing. Some people have given up on getting the testing. So we're not sure if we're even going to know about some of those 25 possibles. And that's 25 plus. There's more than that. In all of my documents I put out to the public, I do reference 3 things. And the first one is the Morris County coronavirus tallies. That's where I got the information I just explained to you a few minutes ago. I also reference the COVID activity level report, which is this green color coded one. And then I also reference the this new document. This document was put out in August, but then it was updated in September and it was updated again in November. You have it in your folder, in your virtual folder, and you also have it in front of you. Anything in yellow is new, is updated. And I'm just going to take a few minutes to go through some of the new things in here. On page 3, things change a little bit there where it says, require staff and students to stay home when sick or when they've been in close contact with someone with COVID-19 within the past 14 days. This is the change part. If someone in their whole household is being tested for COVID-19 due to illness, students and staff should also stay home until the test result is received. So even if somebody in your household has symptoms and may have COVID, even if you don't have the symptoms, you should also stay home. On page 4, I'll bring a point on, this also is about siblings. So this is basically the same thing here, that people should self-quarantine until they have a negative test. That's family members. So if you're in a household where, example, one of the parents has COVID or COVID-like symptoms, all people in the household should self-quarantine. Next one. Then on page 13, that same statement is made at the bottom of that chart. I'm going to point out a couple other parts. So one of the things that came up now is, if basically in this chart, where the reason why we closed this time, I want to make sure everybody understands, is the 1, 2, 3, the 5th box down on page 15. By the way, page 15 is like the go-to sheet for every superintendent right now. And this, like I said, was just revised on Thursday. Some of the revisions are in yellow. So I'm just looking at box 5 now. So it starts off with a significant community outbreak is occurring or has recently occurred. That is what was going on in our town, because as you can see, we went from 200 cases to over 300 cases in 23 days. So because we have such high transmission rate right now in our town, or positivity, we have to close the schools for a minimum of 14 days. Let me point your attention to page 15 at the top, the yellow highlighted part. This is important. Many factors need to be considered when deciding to close schools, such as whether all close contacts of cases can be identified and excluded from school. So I want to make sure everybody knows, when I make the decisions about closing, it's not really just me doing it. I'm the final say, but I do a lot of work to get to that decision. I confer with many different people from outside the district and inside the district. So after I discussed it with our people outside the district, meaning our health department and a local expert on communicable diseases, after I did that, I had a conversation with our nurses. And I asked them a very simple question. I said, are you confident that you know all of the students and staff who should not be in school because they've either been exposed to COVID, have COVID symptoms, or are positive? And all 3 of them from all 3 schools said no. That was an issue for us right there. This thing was happening quickly. It was spreading through the town, and we were having a hard time making sure we knew of all the cases in the schools. So another thing that's changed on page 15, box number 6 in yellow, that new yellow language in the highlighted yellow language. By the way, this is posted on the website already, where it says 2 or more cases are identified within 14 days that occur across multiple classrooms, are not linked to exposures outside a school setting, and a clear connection between cases cannot easily be identified. So before, that sentence are not linked to, that section of the sentence are not linked to the exposures outside the school was not there. So now I asked for a clarification from our health department. I haven't received it yet. The way I read it and the way several other of my superintendent colleagues reads it is that that would mean that as long as the cases are not linked to the school setting, that it would not require closing. I will share with you the clarification from the county once I get it. So those are all the changes. As you can see, once you move into the orange, which is called high, many things kick in. And that includes the part where once you're in the orange, anybody who has symptoms should be quarantined. This could be any of the symptoms. So you could have a cough and you should not be in school, and neither should anyone in your immediate household be in school. As you can see, once you move into the orange, I'm not going to say it's impossible to open school, but it's difficult to open school in the orange. I also got clarification today from our county health department, in the local health department, that if we do move to red, and if you could see it on page 3 of the document, with the color-coded document, they will require schools to be closed for a minimum of 14 days. I'm not sure if that means 14 days from the time you go into red or whatever the 14 days is. We'll definitely get that clarification. But if we do move into the red, I'm going under what I learned today from the health department, that we would be closed for a minimum of 14 days. Before we move on, I'm not sure if Mrs. Wagner's okay with it, but I'd be fine with answering questions now, or if you want to hold it till the end of the meeting, I can answer questions if you have any other questions or want further clarification.
Thank you, Dr. Forte. I think now's a great time to pause with a lot of information and see if anybody has any comments or questions.
Mrs. Wagner, we have not opened yet, unless if you want to open for the public right now.
I'm sorry, let me clarify. Comments, questions from the Board of Education members. There'll be a time for the public in a few minutes.
Mr. Kim, go ahead with your question.
Thanks, Dr. Forte. I appreciate you explaining everything that you did here. When you talk about the color-coded statuses from orange to red, are you
Just hold on a second, please.
Sure.
Sound up.
Did you want me to continue or?
Cindy's working on increasing the sound.
Okay.
James, while we're waiting, I just want to let you know that Dr. Forte was kind enough to copy that 17 or so page document that we are currently looking at, but he also emailed the updated version out today, so you should find it in your email as well.
Both the documents we're looking at right now are also in the Board of Ed packet for today. Okay, Mr. Kim.
Okay. So thank you very much for the great explanation, Dr. Forte. When you mentioned that if it ever goes from orange to red, are you referring to the county? And if if the county decides that we're in a red status, then that's when we would fully implement remote learning or the 14-day closure?
If you could look in your board agenda today,
Okay.
if you can open that up today, you'll see two documents.
Yeah, I see the documents. I have them open.
Okay. So it's not a county, it's a region. It's ours is the Northwest region.
Okay.
This is from the state of New Jersey Health Department. So the state would make the determination, and if you can look at that document, you can see the map and you can see how it says Northwest, which is our county, and I think it's Passaic, Sussex, Morris, and Warren.
Got it. Yeah, it was a simple question of whether it was county based or if it's bigger than the county. So thank you for clarifying.
James, I think right now, because so many of the regions are high on the document that you're viewing, where most of New Jersey is orange, it's hard to differentiate. But if you look back historically in this document, when they came out with the update, the regions were identifiable at that time.
If I
Yeah,
may, also on the second page, that you, in the footnotes, it has a breakdown of the counties that are included in each region. Number two.
Yeah, the map's a little confusing because it shows the county lines, even though it's multiple counties that are in a region. So it would be nice if they actually identified the regions, but it's a little bit confusing on the map.
It's in the footnotes, second page, number 2. The following is a breakdown of counties contained within each public health region. And Dr. Forte was right. It's Morris, Passaic, Sussex, and Warren.
Thank you, everyone.
Laura, can I ask a quick question? Hey, Dr. Forte, thanks for the explanation. And I know you've been working diligently with both the township health department as well as the county, and obviously referencing a lot of the other superintendents that you guys have been working together on. So I appreciate all the amount of work you've been putting into it. I want to ask a quick question about you referred to page 15 at the top where the change was, but really it talked specifically about ensuring we understand as a school district, all the close contacts have been identified and are excluded from school. And you mentioned that there was not confidence with our nursing staff that they could make that judgment call. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Is there anything that's a concern to me? Was it just that it happened so fast and we couldn't keep up with it, which is understandable? We have a limited amount of staff to do it, or were there other factors that fell into that?
There was a few factors. One was it happened very quickly. The second thing was we were finding out from people that they were testing, that they received a positive test, but didn't hear from the county for a few days. We started to be concerned that there were people who weren't self-reporting to us, but we weren't receiving the information from the county, quickly. And then the last thing we found out was the last part that was concerning us really had to do with making sure people were self-reporting and telling us that they were either exposed or they had symptoms. We don't go by rumors. When you hear a rumor once, you just don't worry about it. You hear it second time, you might brush it off. Once you hear it the third time, we start thinking maybe we don't have all the information. To us, I think those three factors were the real big thing. And the fact that it happened so quickly was difficult. It was hard to keep, and I don't blame any of them for it. The chart they put together is amazing. It's got so many things on it. And I mean, we probably have 50 people on that chart right now that could possibly have it. Then we have some possibles that came back with negative results, but we were also getting several people saying that this is what another thing that was concerning. You had a child with symptoms, couldn't get a test, symptoms go away. Now I want to send them to school. And, they want, some people would go to the doc, 2, 3 testing sites. I know of people that have gone to 5 or 6 testing sites and couldn't get a test. I think it's just human nature. After a while, I guess the people realize that the kid's symptoms are going away. Nobody else has it. And I think he's okay. And then want to send him back to school.
I think the concerning part to me is that we as a community are all in this together. And if you appropriately follow the health check in the morning, we should be fairly well covered. Not perfect, but it's concerning to me when I hear that we are not confident that we have all the information necessary to safely open the schools. So number one, I applaud you for, if you don't feel we can safely open the schools, please don't. Number two, I would plead to the public that are listening to please, we are all trying to do this safely. The staff has done a phenomenal job of getting us open as much as we have this year. And we can only continue to do that with everybody being forthright and coming to us with as much information as they have and being super precautious on an individual basis so that we can be safely back in the schools when appropriate. So.
Dr. Forte, thank you. And I just want to piggyback off of what Mike said. Thank you I know you've been doing a lot of extra work in relation to this. So thanks to you, the rest of the administrative staff, and the nursing staff as well. I want to ask a question kind of similar to what Mike had said. I know that statewide, they had been reporting difficulty with follow-up for contact tracing. Has our local health department talked to you about that at all? Not specifically the school students, but the county or the town in general?
I've only heard it on a state level. I haven't heard it on a local level. I didn't ask them that specifically, but the fact that we were finding out about cases, 5 days after people self-reported was concerning to us.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to summarize again and ask you, is it possible with this document being so long, the significant changes that have been made, is it possible to maybe put together a document that's on our website for parents to reference? Because if we open during an orange time now, their protocol has to change as to whether they keep their student home or send them.
You mean other than this thing that we have in our hand, you mean like a summary?
Yeah, and not even necessarily of every change, but of the important changes, especially the ones that relate to, I think parents kind of got into a routine understanding what the health screening was, but now these guidelines will have changed for them. So just a summary of those changes.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I will get on that.
And Laura, can I just ask one more question or point, actually more or less point something out? I think Dr. Forte had forwarded us an email that he had gotten from the local health department with a little bit of clarification. And I think I was talking to Laura about it earlier. And actually, I think I found it in the document exactly where they were referencing. And I think it's important for the public to hear. If you look at page 13, under the high risk category, the absolute last thing in that orange column says close contacts of an individual with COVID-19 compatible symptoms should be excluded through 14 days from the date of last contact or until the individual tests negative for COVID-19. So what that means that if we have a student who has a COVID-19 symptom, we all know the list is extensive, right? Their close contacts cannot be in school until they have tested negative or been diagnosed with something else. So if someone reports that morning that they have a COVID-like symptom, that means potentially that entire class, if they were close contacts, would need to be excluded from school. In addition, I have no idea how anybody would ever be able to, on a daily basis, do the contact tracing to verify that the close contacts of that student, because those kids could have contact outside of school, are identified. So that is, I have to say, after looking at the guidance from the local health department, which I appreciated, and looking through this document again, that individual statement is probably the single hardest thing to open in Orange. And I am actually quite shocked that as many school districts are open right now, that are in the Northwest. In fact, 5 out of 6 of the regions, as many schools are open as they are, because with that alone, I have no idea how you can confidently and safely follow the guidance and be open.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I would just point out that this update came out, is that Thursday, the 19th, November 19th? This update and changes came out, so it is fairly recent. But I just want to highlight for the public some things that Dr. Forte had mentioned. Dr. Forte, if I misspeak at all, please jump in. But on the 25th, which is Wednesday, there will be an announcement about whether school on the 30th will be open for in-person or not, based on the most accurate and recent numbers that Dr. Forte and the local Department of Health have access to. And to reiterate, and there's been a lot of questions about this, that Dr. Forte closed the district, and we're still currently closed because of a community outbreak. So I hope that Dr. Forte's detailed report has made clear to the public that it is not just as black and white as a positive test or a negative test. There's many different factors that have to go into consideration. Dr. Forte, did you have anything else in your report?
That was it for my report.
Thank you. Dr. Cullis, Assistant Superintendent's comments.
Thank you. So this month is Native American Heritage Month. So our teachers are using multiple resources, including Discovery Education and nativeamericanheritage.gov to support instruction. So you may be seeing some videos and some activities from those sites. They're fantastic resources that we subscribe to, and they do have some really great activities for students. Our teachers will be participating in a series of 3 diversity, equity, inclusion, and cultural competency workshops from Inspired Instruction. So December 2nd is the recognition of bias and the self-reflection process. January 13th, culturally responsive teaching. And February 11th, representing all students in the curriculum, approaching race and equity in the classroom. So that is a continuation of our work that started in October and works with our RPSE district committee. So we're pretty excited about this opportunity.
Could I just jump in there for a second? Just so the board knows and the public, December 2nd and February 11th are our regularly scheduled PD days that were already on the calendar to be half days. We will have to add January 13th as an AM only session. It has been published in all my updates. It has been changed on the calendar, and we will keep sending reminders.
And then finally, I have a merit goal change that you notice in the agenda. And I'm just going to let you know what that change is. Okay, so it is now a quantitative goal. We're rescinding the goal on incorporating safer and smarter schools sexual abuse prevention lessons, which we will still try to work on that curriculum. But as far as the merit goal, it's been replaced with a quantitative goal. Students in grades 6 through 8 will increase math proficiency as measured by Linkit benchmark assessments. So all of our students at this point have taken their math proficiency first benchmark. And it's just a rating of how many students will be proficient or moving up proficiency levels. And the Linkit system is coordinated and normed with the NJSLA. So it's a good predictive measure of how our students would perform and if there are any gaps in standards. And this will be particularly important since we went virtual in the spring and we didn't have the NJSLA. So we really need to know where those gaps are. So this is a great resource. As of right now, the NJSLA, science, ELA, and math are all scheduled for a window of March 13th through June 11th. As soon as the actual weeks of each grade level testing are available, I will be updating the testing calendar on the website and sending it to parents. This concludes the Assistant Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Cullis. If I could just ask one question, the change in the merit goal, that came from the county, is that right? Did they give you any
It
feedback
did.
about that?
Yes, we have a change in leadership in the county and people read the guidelines a little differently. And because one of my roles is curriculum writing, he just had some concerns whether or not this went under my regular job or beyond. social emotional health, and in particular, we were adding to the social emotional health curriculum. There are no standards for the safer, smarter sexual abuse prevention. So that really is something that Denville is doing beyond what is required by the state. So I think that's, where I see that it is a little bit beyond what anybody else is doing at this point. But, it's his decision. So I changed that goal.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out the reasoning for the change. Thank you very much. Business administrators' comments.
No comments.
Thank you, Damaris. Okay, is it 8 o'clock? It is 8 o'clock, and we are going to open the meeting to public comments at this time. So if you're here and you'd like to make a comment, please step up, introduce yourself, and do so. If you are online, go ahead and type your comment in the chat box, and we'll reach out to you. We're just going to give you a minute to do that. Thank you. Okay, it is 8:01, and there is no one present coming forward, and there are no comments in the chat box, so we are going to close the public session. There will be a second public session at the end of the meeting, and we're going to move on to old business. Mr. Cass, would you mind moving us through old business? Would you mind moving us through old business? Sorry if you didn't hear.
Not a problem. Glad to do it. In fact, when I first joined the board, this is what they gave me to do. They didn't want to stress me out at the first meeting, or the second or third one either. Okay, I'm going to ask the board to approve a number of reports here from October 2020. We have item A, the Treasurer of School Monies Report and the Board Secretary Report. Item B, Education Reports, Report of Student Enrollment, October 2020, and Report of the Health Office, October 2020. And item C is minutes from our work session meeting of October 12th, 2020, regular session meeting, October 26th, 2020.
Second.
Mr. Lohr?
Thank you, Mr. Lohr. Any questions or comments?
I have a question. On the attendance report, I noticed that the student enrollment is going down. I don't know if this is something with the formula on the Excel sheet, or maybe as we did, we lost a lot of students when we had the Hurricane Sandy and the ensuing recession. Our student counts went down quite a bit. And so we've gone from 1,671 September 2019 down to 1,623 September 2020.
We did graduate a large class of 240 in 8th grade. And then we have quite a dip where we have class of like 185, 175 down to 155. And then it starts building back up again. The last two, kindergarten and now first grade, are 185 and then 190. So it's kind of building up, but not to the place we were with 240. Surprisingly, that class actually came in at 199 as 6th grade and went out at 240. So we actually gained 40 students in the 2 years that they were in Valley View. So it's,
Yeah, our normal size is between 180 and 200. So this is just a large class that went out.
So we can see what happens over the next two enrollment periods, how the younger grades are coming along. I know when I walk the dog, I see a lot of young families with strollers and kids. Some of the strollers have 2 kids. So could be an uptick again. But I thought that was interesting because I know it's something you really have to keep an eye on with the affordable housing coming in. And we spent a lot of money leasing the building across the street. So it's all intertwined.
Sandy, just to clarify, you were just said that the, I thought I was, is this, can you guys hear me? How's this? Okay. It's hard to talk to you without looking at you, but I'll try. Sandy, just to clarify, you said that the kindergarten class was 5 kids larger than the first grade class?
Not looking at that exact report, but when I'm just thinking back of September to September, and it was like 185 last year, and then we were just about 190. I don't
Okay.
have the report exactly in front of me if any have left, but it's right around there. So it's a little bit bigger than,
Right.
this kindergarten class was a little bit bigger than the one before. And it's hard to believe it's almost January and we'll be doing this again. But as we know, the last 2 years, it's been 50% were the oldest children in their family. So we
Great,
did take that data.
great, thank you.
More to come then. Any other comments or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Capello,
Yes?
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
I abstain from the minutes from October 26th and a yes on everything else.
thank you. Mrs. Wagner,
Yes. On to new business, action to be taken. Mr. Anderson, would you mind moving us through personnel, please?
I'd be happy to. If there are no objections, I'd like to move under personnel items 1 through 20. Please pay special attention to the addendum, which includes under item 1P for Peter and under item number 20D for David. I would like to point out a few quick items. Actually, I'll do that after we move it. Sorry.
Second?
Mr. Lure.
Dr. Forte, can you just explain in the addendum, there's security listed? Can you clarify for the public why they're on the agenda since we have officers?
So these three gentlemen would provide security to the buildings when outside organizations are using our gyms. And there was a report, there's a plan in your packet that's on the agenda for approval as well. So when the district moves to fully virtual, the gyms will be closed. Our PAL people all know that. This person would be there to make sure that our rules that are in that document that I just referred to are being enforced, not leaving it up to the coaches or parents to police themselves. And these gentlemen would only work as needed. So there's really no need for them to do anything for the time being. If the gyms do open, then they would be there to provide the security, just really be a person, a representative of the district, paying attention to making sure that people are following the rules, that there's not extra people there. People are wearing masks when required, and there aren't more than one team in the building at the same time. The other team would have to wait outside and so on.
Thank you. I appreciate the care that you took in drafting those regulations for the sports teams to be able to use the buildings, but also for us to keep the buildings safe. So thank you for explaining.
Yeah, if I can just point out a couple of quick things. First of all, on item number 1B, Paula Kina, congratulations on hopefully moving across the guide here, as well as merit pay for our business administrator office. Thank you to all of them. Congratulations. And retirement for Jane Zielinski. And then the final thing I wanted to just point out was just to follow up on Dr. Cullis's comments during her her comment section. Item number 16 and 17 were the changes in the merit goals that she discussed.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
A special thank you again to Mrs. Zielinski. She's been a reading specialist with us for quite a while at Lakeview and does a phenomenal job, and she will be missed at Lakeview.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Dr. Cullis and Mr. Anderson. If there are no other questions, roll call.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. On to instruction and program. Mrs. Gould, would you move us through that section, please?
Of course. Sorry, I'm just switching screens and scrolling. One moment. Okay, for instruction and programming, I move for the board to resolve to approve the attached plan for virtual after-school enrichment program for the 2021 school year for Lakeview and Riverview Elementary Schools. And the items 1 and 2, sorry. Item 2 is the board approve the attached nursing services plan for 2021.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Just a thank you to the staff for putting together the virtual after-school enrichment. I think anything we could do to try to keep some normalcy and give some additional resources to students is much appreciated.
Agreed. I know that my students definitely look forward to the enrichment program. So thank you for the staff for continuing to allow us to run that. If there's nothing else, roll call.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. Okay, we are on to policy revisions. Mr. Capello, would you mind moving us through them, please?
I'd be happy to. If there are no objections under policy revisions, I move for second reading and adoption, policies as listed, 1649, 2270, 2431.3, 2622, 2464, 5111, policy and regulation 5320, 5610, regulation 5610, 5620, and policy and regulation 8320.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lure. Dr. Forte, you said we're going to be seeing a lengthier list in the next few meetings. Is that right?
About the same as you have right there. We'll start in December for January. They were ones that we got in the summer, but put on the back burner due to all the COVID things. And these are really, most of these things are COVID related, except for the G&T.
Okay, it doesn't seem that we have any questions, so roll call, please.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. Mr. Kim, would you mind moving us through finance, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I motion that we approve tonight the 3 items found under finance. Number 1 being 3 checks as listed on the agenda. Number 2 is the approval of the contract and addendum with Tri-County Behavioral Care. And finally, number 3, to approve the settlement agreement for a student.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lure. No questions, so roll call, please.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. On to operations. Mr. Cass, would you move us through that, please?
Two items to move under operations, transportation, and buildings and grounds. Item number one is to approve the outsourcing of the following joint transportation agreement with the Huntington Educational Service Commission for the 2020-2021 school year. Route 303, $55,842.45. Route 307, $57,067.12. And Route 358, $57,684.04. Under buildings and grounds, I'm asking the board to approve the attached lease with the Lakeland Hills YMCA for childcare for the 2021 and 21-22 school year. And item 2.2 is to approve the attached 2021 facility usage plan for town athletics.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Capello.
I have a question about the facilities usage plan. Is it my understanding that we are requiring the wearing of masks at all times except when the kids are actually on the court playing?
Our regulations are they must wear them at all times. When they're playing the sport, it's up to the individual sport. For example, if wrestling program has wrestling, they're not going to be able to wear a mask. So they'll have to go by their rules. Whether or not the basketball would like their kids to wear a mask, that would be up to them.
Is there any way that we can, I mean, I understand that wrestling would be highly difficult to use to wear a mask due to the nature of the sport. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for us to permit basketball to play without a mask. Is there, sorry, ooh, that was a lot sparkier than I thought it was going to be. Is there a way that we can, is there any way that we can change that? Or does it require some kind of rigmarole that I'm not familiar with?
You mean on the document itself? Because I've already gone through that with the heads of the programs, and that's the document they'd agreed to. So if I was going to do that, I have to pull it from the agenda and then start over again, because that's not what I told them. And really, the way I look at it is that the kids, some of it's up to their sports group. Like we're going to require the limits. We're going to require how many kids can be in the room. We're going to require that there's no parents there, no siblings, nobody else running around. They're limited to a certain area. They have to be socially distant on the bench. They have to wear a mask on the bench. The coaches have to wear a mask at all times. But I don't know if it's something I want to regulate, of whether or not during a sporting event the child has to wear a mask. Our kids can take the masks off too when they're eating and drinking. And I know for a fact you couldn't wear a mask when you're wrestling because you could get choked by it and somebody could rip it off and things like that. Basketball, they might be able to do it, but I didn't know if I wanted to get in the habit of, I didn't know if I wanted to be in the business of dictating to them that they had to wear them.
If I could interject, with soccer, we had to have our reopening plan, and the soccer went through these various phases from clinic, light exercise, all the way into playing games when we got into phase 4. And phase 4 made masks optional. And we told the parents that if you want to wear a mask, your child to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you don't. I saw masks more so when like the pre-K, some of the younger kids, a lot of them will wear it. But the older kids, especially some of the travel games, I rarely saw wearing a mask. It's pretty unhealthy to be exerting yourself physically, running up and down a field or running up and down a court, wearing one of these masks. It's, but again, it was optional and seemed to work okay. We had a handful of parents in one young grade that wanted everybody to wear masks in that division. We said, well, we can't do that. We can't force people to wear the mask. We're in phase 4. That's what the state's permitting. But we're going to look at a mask-only division in the spring and see how many people are interested in doing that, which means that the kids would have to wear their masks all the time when they're playing soccer. Parents and coaches had to wear masks all the time.
Just for clarification, if the schools are closed, there will not be any usage of the gyms, correct?
I'm going to clarify the word closed. I'm going to move to virtual. If the schools, I'm trying to stick with that. So that's just so you guys know, we're trying not to say closed. If the schools are fully virtual and students are not in the buildings, the outside organizations will not be permitted to use the facilities, and they're aware of it.
Okay, fully virtual. I apologize. And thank you.
Dr. Forte, in the agreement for the facilities usage plan, I believe that it highlights that it's not during the week at all, but only on the weekends as well. Is that right?
Originally, I was just going to do Saturday, and you saw a few emails that came around from basketball asking for some more time. And I really felt like Friday wouldn't be a big problem for us because there's no school the next day, right? So the custodians can close up and still be okay. So I did add at Riverview Annex, at Riverview, and at Valley View only, those 3 sites, 2 hours on Fridays, and they're staggered so that we could have one person at Riverview and Riverview Annex rather than having to have 2 security people. Somebody could go back and forth so that the times are staggered.
So just to be clear, there's no one allowed on Sundays?
As of now, they haven't asked for any Sundays. I did offer that as an option to them, but the cost was a lot more due to the overtime and all the other things that are required. So for right now, it would be Friday evenings and Saturday all day is what they're asking for.
So Mr. Laura, I don't know if that makes you feel a little bit better that should there be anything airborne exchanged on Saturday, that the building would have that much more time to rest before students would be back into the buildings on Monday. Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Lure,
Yes on transportation 1.1, yes on buildings and grounds 2.1, no on 2.2.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner.
Yes. Okay, we are at good of the cause, committee reports, correspondence, any discussion items?
I had a question. With this virtual learning going on, how are we doing the teacher evaluations, the walkthroughs that we've done in the past with a variety of administrators and our home office people?
We are still required to do our formal evaluations. And so when we are in the building, we will continue to do those evaluations. When it's virtual, the difference is that we can conduct the evaluation virtually on their virtual classroom, but we give them an opportunity to provide additional artifacts of something we may not see in that lesson, such as classroom procedures. When we're in the classroom, it's really evident. There's signs on the walls. There's more evidence to see classroom procedures. So their teachers virtually are given an opportunity to give us a list. Here's our procedures, such as students are required to keep their camera on. I use a bell to call the students back and so forth. So they are allowed to give they're required to give at least 1 artifact and no more than 5. So that's the difference, but it's the same rubric. As far as the walkthroughs, we are doing walkthroughs when they're in the building, but we are not recording that data. You know how we were doing it every day. We were hitting pretty much every teacher was getting a walkthrough every day. That is not happening to the extent that it was because we're not walking fully into the room or between the students anymore,
Yeah, the virtual is replacing that, obviously.
right?
Yeah,
So
so from a quantitative standpoint, it would be the same as if we were in school all the time, only you're doing the virtual observation as well as the walkthroughs when you can.
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So they're still required to get the same number of evaluations and so forth. It's just slightly different of what they have to do for that evaluation.
Laura, I'd like to bring up something Mrs. Gould brought up today, I think via email. I just wanted to maybe open it up for discussion. If we're moving into a high-risk situation, do we want to consider taking our board meetings back to all virtual?
Sorry, how does the board feel?
I'm okay with continuing to be here. We're socially distant and everybody's wearing a mask, so.
I think the concern is that we could switch next week to back in person. So I don't know what the notice would be, Damaris, if like, how could we switch back and forth that quickly? I know we still do it virtually, but is there a requirement to have in person if we're going to advertise it as in person?
I re-advertised back in August that we could do it either way, virtually or in person. So we are covered until December.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with the way we have it now because I think we have the option. I think the concern is if no one's comfortable coming in person, that would be, but even if we did that, as long as one person was here, we should be covered, right? I think.
That is correct.
Yeah, I think at the very least, maybe Damaris and I would come in. I mean, we could stay this far apart from each other and do it, and then everybody else could be virtual. I don't think I'd be totally comfortable with just having no one, just because we started letting the public know that we do this. Maybe we could slowly get back to that if we needed to. Like if things got the way it was in April or May, we could do that. But maybe the first one or two meetings, if you remember the first time I came in anyway, so we could do that. We could slowly get back to that if we want, even though I know our public isn't so large today. I'm not saying anything bad about Ben, but he's the only one back there.
This is Mrs. Gould. I think that for the regular session and work session, doing both is fine now that we have the sound straightened out. It's much better now. We had some rough spots early on in the meetings, but I have no problem with that. I had asked about the committee meetings. I didn't realize they had all switched permanent. I thought it was a one time in November, but thank you for bringing it up.
For now, other than this meeting, is about the only adult meeting going on in the district. The rest of them, and because it's a public meeting, the other meetings aren't public meetings, thank God. But we will continue the public meeting as is. If we want to reduce the numbers, I think that's fine with if everybody wants to do that. But our committee meetings, until further notice, we will do via Google Meets.
That actually brings up an interesting point. Are we covered under the new executive order from the governor for 10 indoor gathering of 10 or more?
He did exempt political activities.
This is political.
Well, like community
Government?
meetings and things.
Government? I don't know.
Yeah, government and political activities, just like the last time it was
I
too.
was going to say, I don't think this counts as a political meeting
Government.
because none of us run with a letter after our names when
Is it a
we're
wedding or a funeral?
when we're on the when we're on the election ballot.
Yeah, I agree. I hope it's not considered a political meeting.
I feel like we fall under the same category as the town council does, even though we're, I guess we're not political because it's not a Republican Democrat kind of thing. But last time I asked our attorney, he said that it's the same as the township. But I can ask him again if you guys want another clarification.
I definitely don't think it would hurt. Thank you. And I think that we all just have to be honest with one another and we only have 9. That's a good point right now, Dr. Cullis. if board members start feeling uncomfortable coming, then just share that with either myself or Dr. Forte or Damaris. And if we don't have, if we start seeing the numbers go up, then we'll reevaluate it. I also just want to point out that until further notice, if there is an executive session, Dr. Forte will share that with us. So if there's no mention of an executive session, we will not be having one. We'll start at the public meeting at 7:30.
I did add, finally, to the top of the executive session and the assistant superintendent comments, it does say no 7 p.m. executive session. So I'll leave that on there until it's gone, and then it means there is one. But I would let you know if we did have one. I would send you a calendar invite with the conference call information. So if you don't get that, there's definitely no executive session prior to the meeting.
Laura, can I make a quick comment? I just wanted to touch on something I had mentioned before during Dr. Forte's comments about school opening and the COVID-19 activity level report and whatnot. My personal belief is that the district has done a phenomenal job when the students were in person, keeping them safe. And I think the proof of that is the fact that, as far as I understand, we've had 0 in-school exposures that resulted in COVID for a student. So kudos to the staff, the custodial staff, the teaching staff, the administrative staff for everything they've done. I strongly believe that our kids are safe in our schools. In fact, to a certain extent, safer than they are being at home, meaning that I can speak for my kids. They want to go hang out with their friends as soon as they're clicking end session on the last class they have for the day. Where in the past, when they were in school, they were coming home, and I think they were that was not as much of a request for them. So I think our kids are safe in school. I think that that's the place where they have the best learning environment. So I would encourage that we try to find a way to get them in school within the guidelines. And I think that's the hard part, is that statement right there, within the guidelines and safely. With these guidelines, I have to say, while in Orange, I can't say it enough that I am shocked that there are so many districts that have not reacted to it and changed. It just seems like, based upon what I'm seeing, it's difficult to open the schools. If a kid gets sick in school, going back to the comment I made earlier, not only are they sick before they come in, but if they get sick while they're in school, they're not feeling well. If one kid basically goes home for almost anything, because anything can become a COVID-19 symptom these days, if one kid goes home, that entire classroom has to go home that day and stay home for 14 days or until a negative test result comes back from the original student. Can we imagine the logistics of having to send home a classroom every day? We just don't have the amount of staff to probably be able to do some of the logistics on that end. So, but with that in mind, if we can find a way to stay within the rules and stay within the guidelines and keep everybody safe and get back into school, I think it's the right thing to do. I do find encouragement in the change that the State Department of Health made with, and Dr. Forte pointed out, I think it was on page 15, with the fact that they're basically looking for, has the exposure been linked to exposures outside of the school setting? That's encouraging to me, because that means they're trying to say, if you don't get COVID in the school and you have 2 cases, you'd be okay to stay open. That being said, I think the fact that we're in a high statewide activity level right now, I think it's going to be difficult to stay within that guidelines. I'm hopeful that we can get out of that soon if we maintain our vigilance as a community and get back to the yellow. And hopefully that'll make it easier to stay open within that yellow timeframe. But I think the public should know that there is no bigger advocate to getting our kids back into school safely than Dr. Forte and Dr. Cullis, I think. I don't want to put words in your guys' mouth, but you guys have been great advocates for saying, hey, we need to do safely what's best for our students in the school. So I applaud you and appreciate the work that everybody's putting into it, but also make sure everybody knows that while we're in this high orange level, it's going to be tough. And I think I would encourage the public to take a look at the documents because they are there and they speak for, they help us guide exactly how we go about or how Dr. Forte goes about making the decisions. So that's all on school opening. One last comment. Happy anniversary to my wife. Sorry to spend it in a board meeting, although she's at parent-teacher conferences tonight. So we'll celebrate tomorrow.
And just to echo your sentiments, I mean, we really are relying on the public. I mean, we have this public plea that the activities outside of school mirror the things that all the safety protocols we're taking in school, because that's really the only way that we will stay open, because we can absolutely control it here, but we have no control out there. So we appreciate all of those families. When you have any signs at all, they're keeping their kids home, so we don't have to send everybody else home as well.
I would just want to echo a little bit of what Mr. Anderson said and point out that Dr. Forte and Dr. Cullis, as well as the staff from the beginning, since the initial committee was set to decide if and how the buildings would reopen, the consensus across the board was the best learning happens in person, and that's what they want to happen. So, of course, I understand there's many concerned parents, and what I would say to the public is just that know that the administration who's deciding and following the State Department of Health as well as the Department of Education guidelines to whether they can or not open the buildings, they don't take the decision lightly. They would certainly prefer to have the students in the buildings, and they're trying to do everything to keep the buildings open as much as possible by following the guidelines. Sorry, I had to take a breath. I think it is difficult to I can't imagine running with one of these things on, just pointing that out a little bit. I also wanted to say that Dr. Forte and I have had many conversations where we discuss not only the educational goals of the district this year, but the goal for COVID this year is to not have one case transmitted in our buildings. And as Mr. Anderson pointed out, that we have been successful to date, even though there have been positive or potentially positive cases within our buildings. There has not been transmission from student to student or student to staff. So I think that it's worth repeating. I applaud the staff and the administration for everything that they're doing to keep everybody safe. I do have one housekeeping item. Our board goal is to increase our HIB training. So I've reached out to Frances, and she is willing to do a virtual training session. And I looked at dates that we have board meetings scheduled already. So her next available date is January 25th. So if you could all let me know this week, January 25th, it would be at 6 o'clock virtually. She estimates the training would be about an hour. We would do that and then either virtually or in person meet at 7:30 during our regular public session. Damaris would have to advertise that as a public meeting. So like I said, if everybody could just let me know.
Mrs. Wagner, if I may.
Mr. Kim, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I want to commend Cindy Costanza. I mean, this is the first time I'm attending it virtually, where there's folks, individuals like yourselves, live at the at Town Hall. And I want to say that this has been a great experience. You guys are loud and clear. It sounds like there were some challenges before, but it appears that Mrs. Costanza has overcome those issues. And I want to give her kudos for the great job that she's been doing. And this is probably just a small sample size of exactly all the hard work that she's been putting in, as well as her team district-wide, so that the teachers can still communicate and teach the children virtually or in person or however it is. I know that sometimes it's a turn on a dime. So kudos to her and her staff for all the hard work. And And for me to experience this virtually, it was almost flawless. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kim.
Actually, Laura, if you don't mind, I'd like to maybe change gears a little bit. We're entering preliminary budget season. I know that administration is starting to put together preliminary numbers. I think this year it's as important or more important than ever. And I thought maybe it might not be a bad idea to have some discussions about what we all feel in terms of going into the budget, what we'd like to see. I know the Finance Committee basically spends a lot of time, and not necessarily everybody else in the board gets a lot of time until later on. So I thought maybe this year it might be helpful if we spend a little more time as a board talking about it.
Damaris, I know that, well, thank you, Mr. Capello, for bringing this up. Damaris, I know that there's funds, or the Finance Committee has discussed setting aside funds for a demographer study. Do you have a number in mind right now for that?
I have approximately $30,000 allocated for the demography study.
And Mr. Kim, do you remember, I know there was quite a range at the possible demographers that we were looking at. Is that within that range?
Yes,
Or-
I believe so. I mean, if I remember correctly, Steve had gotten a quote for, I want to say $15,000 to $20,000. So it was a while ago, so I don't remember 100%, but maybe Steve, if you remember or recall.
It was from Dr. Grip. His fee was broken down into modules. I think if we got all the modules, it would be 25,000.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are adding money in the budget for additional ESY program for helping students catch up if students are not gaining all the learning that we're hoping to gain throughout the year due to the COVID crisis. So we are looking at extending that program that Dr. Cullis spearheaded last year.
I don't know if it's so particular, maybe it's a little more global. I guess what I'm trying to get at is I'd like maybe to have some discussions, if you agree, earlier on in terms, so if the administration is going in a direction before we get to a point where a lot of things are more set in stone, maybe we have some discussions about what we feel. I think this is a year where taxpayer relief, I think, is something that should be on our minds. Obviously, we have costs that we have not necessarily intended or not necessarily foreseen. So there's going to be a lot of pulling factors, I think, this year especially. So I'd like maybe as a board early on to have discussions about where we all want to see the budget and where we want to see, if we want to leave increases on the table, then maybe as a board we can start to talk about that sooner rather than later.
I think it's a very good point. Damaris, if we think about this and bring this up at our next meeting, do you feel like that would be far enough in advance to kind of help you make decisions that you need to make for the budget process?
I would like the information, the sooner the better, absolutely. I already collected all the data from all the administrators at this time. It was due last Friday. Right now, I'm just analyzing the budget and balancing it out. So if we can get that information sooner before the next board meeting, that'll be great. Normally during the December break, I review the budget with Steve, and at that point, I would like to be balanced.
So if I may follow up with what Dino is requesting. Dino, correct me if I'm wrong, are you suggesting that we try to not increase the taxpayers' burden this cycle or the next budget cycle, and maybe perhaps if by letting Damaris know that maybe she could try to present a budget that doesn't increase the taxpayer burden or by 2.5%? Is that where you're leaning towards?
Well, I guess basically what I'm basically telegraphing my own personal opinion. And I guess what I'm saying to everyone is that if you all agree, maybe we should all, if we can all come up with what our opinions are and get that to them so that they understand where we're headed as a group. I'm not saying that's the right approach. I'm telling you guys this year, I feel it's really important for us to keep taxpayer relief as much on our forefront as possible. Again, my opinion. If the majority of the rest of us feel the same way, then I think we owe it to them to know that as soon as possible.
Can we decide on that tonight then, as a group? Is that something that Mrs. Wagner, you feel we could do, or?
I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on it, and I'll reserve my opinion till the end, but might I suggest looking at more incrementally as opposed to, 0% increase or the 2 or above 2 with the waiver percent increase. Maybe we look at somewhere in the middle there as well. But again, I'd like to hear the other board members' thoughts on it.
Can I recommend an idea? Maybe everybody wants to email the finance committee, and during the next committee meeting, we can address those issues. That'll be fine.
So just to clarify, if you could email Mr. Kim and Damaris with your thoughts about that, that way they can discuss it in committee and go from there. Does that sound like a plan to you?
That works for me as well. Thank you.
I just want to say that I think as a board, we've discussed frequently decreasing the tax burden on the community. And I think we take that responsibility seriously. But I also think that we have had a lot of unforeseen costs. And I just want the public to be aware that that's a very sensitive balancing act, that while we want to keep taxes as low as possible, that we also need to make sure that we cover the expenses and then have some type of cushion for emergencies. So it is definitely a balancing act. Okay, so just to recap, you guys are going to let me know if the 25th works for you, and you're going to get back to Mr. Kim and Damaris about your thoughts on tax increases for the next budget cycle. Anything else anybody wants to discuss? Okay, so at this time, it is 8:47, and we are going to open up for our second public comment section. Okay, we don't see anybody on, so we're going to go ahead and close at 8:47 as well. There's no need for an executive session following.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.